Most families don't go broke from long-term care because they did nothing. They often go broke because they did the wrong thing at the wrong time. And they did it because somebody told them something that sounded simple. They heard Medicare would pay. They heard they could just give away assets. They heard the annual gift tax exclusion also worked for Medicaid. They heard a revocable living trust protected everything. They heard their friend, neighbor, or barista did something and everything turned out fine. That is what makes Medicaid planning so dangerous. The myths sound reasonable when your family is scared. The care bills are piling up and everybody is desperate to do something. Unfortunately, just doing something can be the fastest way to destroy the options your family may have had if you had slowed down, learned the rules, and built a real care assistance game plan. This is also why most attorneys don't handle Medicaid planning. Many are very good attorneys in their own fields, but Medicaid planning has its own rules, exceptions, penalties, timing issues, lookback periods, exempt assets, countable assets, caregiver issues, trust issues, and practical problems that don't fit neatly into ordinary estate planning. The result is that families often get advice from people who are well-meaning, partially informed, or just flat out wrong. And by the time the mistake is discovered, mom's money may already be disappearing into long-term care costs. The government probably doesn't mind that the rules are confusing. If the rules are confusing enough, a lot of families will simply spend their own money, drain the accounts, sell the assets, and only ask for help after much of the estate it's already gone. Whether that confusion is intentional or just the natural result of a massive government program, the practical result is the same. Families who believe Medicaid myths can lose options they never even knew they had. I had a family come in to meet me about Medicaid planning for their widowed mother. There were 3 adult children involved, 2 brothers and a sister. They were trying to figure out how to protect what their mother had left before long-term care costs consumed everything. They were not bad people. They were not trying to cheat the system. They were doing what many families do when panic starts to set in. They were grabbing onto something that sounded like a plan. The sister had talked with her old college roommate, who was now a real estate attorney. That roommate was not a Medicaid planning attorney, but she knew enough to recognize danger when she heard it. The children explained that they were going to start giving away mom's assets to the children's spouses, and the grandchildren at what they believed was going to be the annual gift tax exclusion amount, and that's going to make mom immediately eligible for Medicaid. No. Thankfully, the real estate attorney told them, hey, wait a minute, that's a bad idea. She didn't try to pretend she handled Medicaid planning. She didn't draft some kind of deed or move assets around or tell them to just go down to the Medicaid office and see what happens. No. She told them she can't help them with that kind of planning, but she referred them to me before they turned a dangerous misunderstanding into a financial disaster. When they came in, I had already sent them materials, including my book, The Long-Term Care Solution, because I wanted them to understand the basics before we got into the strategy. That matters because Medicaid planning is not something you can understand by picking up one rule and pretending it controls every situation. You have to understand enough of the system to know why the easy answer is often not the right answer. The problem was that they had not really read the book. They had pieces of information, but the pieces were scattered, incomplete, and in some cases completely wrong. As we talked, it became clear they didn't just believe one Medicaid myth. They believed several of them at the same time, and each one was pushing them toward action that could have created serious problems. They thought Medicare might cover more than it actually would. They thought gifts could be made under the annual gift tax exclusion without Medicaid consequences. They thought moving assets quickly before applying might help. They thought signing over property might be a shortcut. They thought a regular power of attorney would probably be good enough. They also thought that because they had heard of other families doing certain things, their mother's situation could probably be handled exactly the same way. That's a dangerous combination. One myth can cause a problem, but 6 myths working together can become an absolute train wreck. The family was essentially preparing to take a bunch of actions first and ask the real Medicaid planning questions later, which is exactly backwards. Once assets are transferred, deeds are signed, accounts are changed, and applications are filed, you may not be able to easily undo that damage. So I stopped the meeting from turning into a strategy session before they had the foundation that they needed. I told them they need to actually read the materials, especially the parts dealing with the myths they had believed were true. They didn't need to become Medicaid experts, but they did need to understand enough to stop treating Medicaid planning like a few simple tricks could just get copied from someone else and everything would be fine. Now, to their credit, they didn't get defensive. They realized they were in over their heads and they agreed to go back, read the book, and return in about a week. And when they came back, the conversation was completely different because now they were no longer asking questions based on panic and half-truths. They were ready to talk about a real plan instead of trying to force their mother's situation into a myth. The first myth families often believe is that Medicare will pay for long-term care. Medicare is primary health insurance for many seniors, and it can be extremely important, but it's not a permanent long-term care payer. It may help with certain services for a limited period under certain rules and situations, but that's very different from paying month after month after month for custodial long-term care. The second myth is that a Medicare supplement solves the problem. No. Medicare supplements can help cover gaps in Medicare covered services, but they don't magically turn Medicare into long-term care insurance. Families who paid for coverage and thought they were protected can be shocked when they learn that the largest expense they now face is not covered the way they thought. The third myth is that ordinary private health insurance will pay for long-term care. No. Private health insurance usually focuses on medical treatment, hospital care, prescriptions, doctors, testing, and similar expenses. It doesn't pay indefinitely for someone to live in a nursing home because they can no longer safely care for themselves. All of this comes down to whether the care that is needed is rehabilitative care to get them better and get them out, or it's custodial care. That's a big distinction. And it leads to a lot of these myths. Now, the fourth myth, you can wait until you need care and then buy long-term care insurance. That's like trying to buy homeowners insurance after the house is already on fire. It doesn't work. Once the need for care is already obvious, the insurance company is not going to create coverage. They're not going to do anything to start a new policy or raise limits. It's just not realistic. The fifth myth is the one that almost trapped the family in my story. They believe they could give assets away at the annual gift tax exclusion amount and then immediately apply for Medicaid. The problem is the annual gift tax exclusion is a federal gift tax concept. It means you can give away so much each year without having to file a gift tax return and have potential gift tax consequences. It's not a Medicaid eligibility exemption. Medicaid just doesn't go and ignore the gift because it wasn't gift taxable and didn't require a return. This is where the Medicaid lookback period becomes so important. If assets are given away during the lookback period, those gifts may create a Medicaid penalty instead of helping the family qualify. That means the family may have moved assets out of mom's name and still created a period when Medicaid won't pay for care. The sixth myth is that a revocable living trust automatically protects assets from a Medicaid spend down. Revocable living trusts are excellent estate planning tools when used for the right purpose, such as avoiding probate, managing assets during incapacity, getting assets to the next beneficiaries in a protected way. However, a revocable living trust doesn't protect assets from Medicaid because the person who created it usually still has access. They have control. They can manage those trust assets and do what they want. The seventh myth is that signing the house over to the kids is an easy Medicaid solution. This is one of the most common panic moves because a deed feels simple, fast, and concrete. Unfortunately, signing over the house can create Medicaid penalties, tax problems, creditor problems, loss of control, and family conflict if it's not part of a properly designed plan. The eighth myth is there is no need for a healthcare power of attorney or living will because the family knows what mom or dad would want. No. The family may know or think they know, but that doesn't mean the hospital, facility, doctor, or court will just accept that without proper legal authority. Long-term care often involves repeated health care decisions, facility decisions, treatment decisions, and end-of-life decisions. And the right documents can prevent the family from being struck or fighting at the very worst possible times. The ninth myth is that a fill-in financial power of attorney form that you can download is good enough. Now, it may look official. It may even work for basic banking tasks, but Medicaid planning often requires very specific language and spelled out and enumerated powers. The agent may need authority to make gifts, which is often excluded from the simple templates, create or fund trusts, enter into caregiver agreements, deal with real estate transactions, apply for benefits, and take actions that a generic document just doesn't allow. And the 10th myth may be the most dangerous because it's the myth that says that there is no need for a real plan. Someone else did something, so the family assumes they can just go ahead and do the same thing. The problem is that Medicaid planning depends on the assets, income, marital status, timing, health conditions, care setting, family structure, state rules, and documents involved in that very specific case. That's why copying another family's Medicaid strategy is so dangerous. The friend, neighbor, or barista may not understand why their situation worked, and they may not even be able to describe it accurately. They may have had different assets, different timing, different documents, different family support, or a completely different care situation. Medicaid planning is not about finding one trick. It's about building a care assistance game plan that fits the actual facts. Sometimes that may involve spending down certain assets. Sometimes it may involve protecting a spouse. Sometimes it may involve a trust or trusts. Sometimes it may involve a caregiver agreement, exempt asset planning, real estate planning, or timing the application carefully. The real point is that families should not act first and ask questions later. Don't start giving away assets because someone mentioned the annual gift tax exclusion. Don't sign over the house because someone said that's what their aunt did. Don't assume Medicare will pay the bill, and don't assume a generic power of attorney will give your family the authority they need when the crisis hits. The family in my story avoided a major mistake because one attorney had the good sense to say, "This is not what I do, and you need someone who handles Medicaid planning." That simple referral may have saved them from creating a penalty period, losing planning options, or making their mother's situation a lot harder than it already was. They still had work to do, but they stopped before turning myths into actual damage to the family. That's the message I want families to understand. Medicaid planning is confusing, and I would not be surprised if the government prefers it that way because confusion causes people to delay, make mistakes, and spend their own money until there is much less left to protect. The answer is not panic, and the answer is not copying someone else's plan. The answer is to get educated and build a real care assistance game plan before taking action. For more information on how Medicaid planning and long-term care planning can really work, go ahead and get the free information at freemedicaidcourse.com. And as I always tell my clients, please stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life. And whatever you do, make it a great day.